Papa Ken, and today I'm going to be going over episode 6 of season 1 of the new Doctor Who, and that episode is called Dalek. Not Dalek, as I used to say, but Dalek. And this episode was by far the best episode I've seen so far of Doctor Who. It blew me away. The story was great. The character development was awesome. And they managed to take a relatively not very intimidating looking creature and not only make it pretty intimidating, very deadly, but they managed to make me sympathetic to it. And that's not something I expected at all through like almost the entire episode, but they managed to do that. And I got to give it up to the person that wrote this. I'll put the name here because I can't remember it, but they did a good job with this one. Now, I will say this. I know that I've ragged on the CGI before, and I have been told that CGI for, this first season just isn't very good overall. They didn't have a lot of money to dedicate toward it because they didn't expect how popular it would be or how popular it would become. So I'm going to take it easy on the CGI, but I will say this. When we see the Dalek, for the most of the time, it is just a stationary, it's a prop, essentially. But there are moments where we get to see it in CGI. And because it is what it is, it's like a metallic object, the CGI actually doesn't look too bad. Now, it does look hokey, but again, I'm not going to hold that too much against it because they were working with what they had. And I won't fault them for that too much. If there's other episodes where it just looks really, really bad, like in the previous one, I'll still call it out, but I'm going to do my best to not let my opinion weigh against that. Now, to get into the actual episode, for those of you that have seen it, and if you haven't, well, again, spoilers, you were warned at the beginning of the video. The Doctor and Rose end up going to 2012 because he has received, or the TARDIS, or he, something like that, received a distress signal from an alien life requesting help. And they end up showing up, they're in this sort of museum, where it's a collection, we find out later, but it's a museum of alien artifacts, including apparently one of the Doctor's old foes. Now, I'm not familiar with any bit of Doctor Who, especially the classic episodes, so if anyone can point out what the helmet or head is that appears at the beginning of this episode, like what it is he's looking at, tell me, please, because I honestly have no idea. I don't know if it's like an old version of a Dalek or what. So, again, please point that out to me. But they end up getting captured. It's sort of a military base, almost a Illuminati kind of thing, because we end up seeing this guy whose name is Henry Van Statten. Yeah, Henry von Statten, Van Statten, whatever, and he is your typical American, very much stereotyped douche. This guy is apparently extremely rich, owns just about everything. He owns the internet, supposedly, but he owns the internet. He is in control of everything, and he ends up firing someone because they question his methods, or they have the slightest question about who he thinks should be the president, or rather the next president. He's just a complete douche. And the entire museum, everything there is part of his collection. And he is very much a collector of alien artifacts, obviously. And his prized possession is something we don't see at first. All we can see is sort of through its own visor. It's this very blue visor. And the first moment we see it, it's screaming. It's a very, you can't really tell it's a scream at first. It almost just sounds electronic, but it's screaming because it's being tortured. So obviously we know what it is that called the Doctor there, but we don't know what it is. Anyway, they bring the Doctor to meet Van Statten, and again, he shows how awesome he is and how much of a douche he is. And, the Doctor's just being his usual self, as per all the other episodes, until they bring the Doctor to see what's in the cage, what they're keeping captive. And that scene is one of the most powerful scenes I think that has been in the show so far. Because the very first thing that he does when he sees this creature, which we find out is the Dalek, there's just this look of pure fear on his face. Just the absolute and utter fear, which we haven't seen, to the best of my knowledge, when it comes to the Doctor at all. I mean, he's been afraid, but he hasn't had just that look of pure fear. And we find out why, because it's explained throughout the episode that the Daleks and the Time Lords it was their big time war that occurred when, or rather, it's what they were talking about in the earlier episode when they were referring to the Last Great War and why all the Time Lords were wiped out and why the Doctor is the last one. And apparently at that time, the Daleks were also wiped out at the hands of the Doctor. Apparently in a previous incarnation, I'm assuming. But in destroying the Daleks, he also destroyed all the Time Lords. And that completely explains why he didn't want to talk about the war, or why he didn't want to talk about where he came from in previous episodes. Because if you were responsible for not only the complete genocide, or almost complete genocide, of an entire alien race, even though they're a bunch of cold-blooded murderers, but also the destruction of your entire race except for yourself and your planet, I wouldn't want to talk about that either. So that's something that, was very mysterious, and I wanted to find out more, but God, it's so powerful when you find out what the actual, why he was so reluctant and why he was so standoffish when it came to his past. So that was awesome. And but shortly thereafter, he finds out, moments later, he finds out that the Dalek is actually completely helpless. It can't attack him. And immediately his fear turns into it's anger and madness. He starts circling the Dalek and taunting it. And they have this conversation where they have this back and forth where, he takes a shot at the Dalek, and the Dalek takes a shot at him, pointing out that not only is it the only one left, but he's the only one left. And you can see this twitch in the Doctor's eyes. I give full kudos to the actor, too, who's, I'm sorry if I slaughtered his last name, but Christopher Eccleston, best shot I've got. But he just does such a good job at emoting throughout that scene and just making me believe everything that's going on. And his madness just builds up and builds up because he realizes that this thing is a cold-blooded killer. It needs to die. In fact, he basically turns it around. He's like, you know what? I think I'm going to, pull your own game here. Exterminate. So he goes over to a wall and pulls a switch and starts killing, or as far as we can tell, just flat out torturing the Dalek, because that screaming starts back, and it's actually quite bone-chilling. I watched this episode twice because I really liked it that much. And, both times where I saw these scenes again, it's very chilling because, not only do we realize, oh my God, this Dalek, a living creature, alien, is being tortured, but the Doctor has pretty much gone mad and is taking out his own vengeance on this creature as well. It hit the first time, but it really hits the second time I saw that episode. But Van Statten ends up pulling the Doctor away, or rather pulling him away from the scene, and ends up taking him to his own room where they strap the Doctor down while they... reverse a little bit. When they pull the Doctor out, Van Statten tells his own scientists to make the creature talk again, because that had been his goal the entire time. The Dalek would never talk to him, even though they knew it was alive. But the Doctor got the Dalek to talk, but, as soon as Van Statten goes back in, it clams up. It's not saying a word. So he essentially tells the scientists to resume the torture until it talks again. Classy guy. But as I was saying, they pull the Doctor into his own room, strap him in, and they use this beam on him, which is apparently sort of an X-ray because it shows this CGI, it shows where the Doctor has two hearts, and it's a very strange X-ray, and even worse in the fact that it apparently is painful because every time the beam goes on him, the Doctor, he doesn't scream, but he's in obvious physical pain. And it was at that point that I realized that not only is this guy a douche, but I hate him. I hated Van Statten from that moment on. And you know what? I have every reason to. Obviously, as I've explained, but as you watch the episode, it's he has no redeemable qualities, or if he has any, it's very, very little. And in fact, in this scene, because Van Statten had been gloating about these great things he had found, these amazing things he had found through alien technology, including the cure for the common cold, although he doesn't want to share it with the world, the Doctor points out something that compares the Dalek to him, or Dalek to Van Statten. And that quote is, "Do you know what a Dalek is? A Dalek is honest. It does what it was born to do for the survival of its species. That creature in your dungeon is better than you." Oh, that quote right there, that was one of those scenes where it's just like, yeah, you tell him! But then Van Statten just turns it around by saying, yeah, you're right, but I'm going to keep doing it. Oh, I hate that guy. And I don't know if he's going to appear in future episodes. I honestly don't. But If he does, I hope someone kills him. I really, really do. Um, oh, okay. Well, getting beyond that, we end up finding out that Rose and this other British guy that they met there, who is a sort of assistant of Van Statten, are talking and go to his room where he shows her some stuff. But one of the things that he does show her is this feed of the room where the Dalek is being kept, which they see that it's being tortured again by the scientists. So Rose immediately says, "We need to go down there." And when Rose meets the Dalek, it's the Dalek is taken on a much different tone. Like, it is actually talking to her, which apparently it hasn't done with any other humans. But it admits it's in pain and that it's dying and that it's the last of its kind. And for those moments of the scene, I really felt sympathetic for this creature because it's realizing or it's admitting that it's dying. It even though the voice sounds really weird, it's just so sad. Which is immediately turned around because when Rose touches it out of sympathy, some sort of genetic DNA transfusion of sorts takes place, which just automatically just gives the Dalek, maybe not its full power, but just so much of its power back to where it escapes its shackles, it breaks out, and actually goes to one of the computers. At first you think it's just going to start mowing down everyone, including Rose, but it doesn't. It turns toward a computer and sticks its suction cup thing in to the computer, and essentially downloads the entire internet, yeah, and also absorbs power from pretty much the entire West Coast, or all the western states from Utah on, which is where the bunker is located, in case I didn't mention that earlier. And from that point on, some of the military that caught the Doctor and Rose earlier goes down and tries to take out the Dalek, but it's just mowing them down. And I will admit that the method in which it mows them down looks silly from my perspective, just because, again, the silly CGI. But getting beyond that, the Dalek essentially seems invincible almost, because it has all these guns being shot at it, and we get this little matrixy bullet time scene where it shows the bullets getting within like maybe 6 inches of it and just disappearing. They just disappear. They don't even ricochet off the thing because the bullets don't get close enough to touch it. And so the Dalek wipes out all those guys, even though Van Statten is yelling at them over the intercom, don't hurt it, don't get a scratch on it. Because, again, he's a douche and he wants it to be in pristine condition for his collection. Jerk. And during this time, Rose, Adam, the new kid, and one of the other soldiers goes up the stairs because, it doesn't have any legs, it doesn't have wheels or anything that they can see. And it gets up to the stairs, and they're making fun of it. It's just like, haha, some destroyer you are. And then all of a sudden it goes, elevate. And it starts elevating and going up the stairs. And while not particularly a terrifying scene, it was a very interesting one because, you kind of realize along with the characters, like, oh, it actually can go upstairs. Everyone is screwed. Now, this brings me to the one truly annoying scene that I just cannot stand about this episode. It really drives me up the wall. And that is, and this happens not only in this episode, but, in other TV shows and other movies, but it's the not essential honorable sacrifice, because the soldier, is standing at the stairs, trying to shoot at the Dalek while Rose and Adam run away. But she doesn't need to. But she says, someone has to try. Guess what? Like 10 guys with machine guns back in the hallway tried, and they failed. They didn't get a single shot on it. What do you think your pistol is going to do? Really? This isn't Halo. In Halo, I think, unless I'm mistaken, the pistol is like more powerful than the machine gun half the time. I'm sorry. But there's no reason for you to sacrifice yourself. It's pointless. Anyway, the Doctor and Van Statten and his assistant, who I didn't mention, she was cute, they decide they're going to have to close the doors. I can't remember what they're called, but it's essentially they're going to shut down the bottom level so that the Dalek can escape. But obviously Adam and Rose are still down there. And what ends up happening, Rose gets trapped in there with the Dalek. But it doesn't kill her. And even though there's a scene where we and the Doctor think that she has died, and I honestly thought that it had happened, because the last thing that the Doctor hears, we don't see anything, but the last thing we hear is exterminate, and then all of a sudden, pew! And, whenever you hear that, pretty much someone dies in this episode, except for Rose. And this is where things really take a very interesting turn, because the Dalek doesn't understand what's going on. It doesn't understand why it can't kill her or why it doesn't kill her. And it admits that it's feeling things, it's feeling emotions, which really confuses it. But anyway, the Dalek reveals to the Doctor that Rose is still alive, and so he releases her because he says, I can't kill her twice. And actually, I was going to say a quote that happened earlier, but I'm going to say that till the end because it's my favorite part of the episode. But anyway, what ends up happening, Rose and the Dalek take an elevator to the very top floor, and the Dalek is getting ready to kill Van Statten because, I mean, I don't blame it at all because, one, he's a douche, and two, he was responsible for its torture the entire time it was there. So it had every reason to kill this guy. But Rose stops it. And it further, like, just confounding this Dalek. It's so confused, it doesn't know what's going on. Meantime, the Doctor is trying to find a weapon that he can use to take out the Dalek because he's the one that knew in the first place it needed to die because it is a tool of destruction. Now, the Dalek says something that's very strange, we didn't expect, is that it wants freedom. It wants to be free. So they go to this, I think it was like a hangar area of the first floor, and it blows a hole in the ceiling, and sunlight starts coming in. And it's at that point it actually opens its chassis, and we see the Dalek outside of, not in its armor, and it's this very deformed, Cthulhu-like octopus thing with a face. It's a mutant, essentially. Like the Doctor says earlier in the episode, there's not much to it. It's a monster. And immediately the Doctor appears behind them, and he's got the gun pointed at it, and he's ready to kill it. And the Rose tells him, no, no. And I mean, you can understand both sides, because on one hand, we know that the Dalek is going through these changes, but on the other hand, the Doctor knows that this thing is, you know, at its core evil. It will destroy humanity if it gets a chance, like it's been doing with everyone previously. Now, what ends up happening is the creature realizes that it is no longer pure. It is no longer a pure Dalek. You know, its goal was to have the Daleks live on through it, but it's not even a pure Dalek anymore because of Rose's DNA and her feelings causing it to change. So it orders her to give it an order to die. Like, it won't just do it on its own, but it wants her to order it to kill itself, which she doesn't want to at first, but she does. And that entire scene, and really this whole episode is just really emotional as it leads up to this, you know, all the little balls that are around the bottom sort of expand out from the Dalek and do this little self-destruct sequence where it just ceases to exist completely. And, it's like, if you haven't seen this episode, you really need to see. I honestly think this needs to be the first episode someone sees of this show. It's like, you can go back and watch the other ones after that, but this is the episode that you should start on because it is just so good. It is so strong and powerful. You know, get a little bit of background on the characters that are going into it, but other than that, just watch this episode first if you have not watched Doctor Who before, because it is so good, and it, like I said, is by far my favorite episode so far. Now, as we end the episode, Van Statten's assistant, the cute one, ends up taking over and has him kicked out because he was responsible for many people's deaths. And yeah, he's just not really fit to lead anymore. But she is, so who knows? She may reappear again at some point. And we also have newcomer Adam apparently joining the crew. He is the new companion, I guess, leading into the next episode. And believe me, I am so looking forward to the next episode after this one. Now, like I was saying before, there was something about this episode I wanted to bring up, and it is a quote. It's a quote from the Dalek, believe it or not. And it's during a scene that I skipped over, but it's one of the scenes where the Dalek just annihilates an entire crew of military people, an entire crew of military, army, whatever they are. But he just slaughters them. And he starts talking with the Doctor, and the Doctor is saying that what the Dalek should do, because it's the only one left, it has no one to take orders from, that it should take the order to kill itself. You know, again, leading to what happens later. But when he says that, the Dalek looks, or whatever it is, but the Dalek says, "You would make a good Dalek," to the Doctor. That quote right there is by far the most powerful part of this entire episode. By far. Because, again, I love the Doctor. He's a great character. but he really, really goes off the deep end for understandable reasons. Like, this is the last surviving creature that just was part of the mass slaughter of his entire people. But that quote right there, "You would make a good Dalek," that you can tell just in the eyes, the character just knows that the Dalek is right, in a way. Like, all the Doctor wants at that point is for its death, its destruction, and that's all a Dalek wants. So, at that point, really, what is the difference between the Doctor and the Dalek? At that point, the Dalek is actually feeling more. It's feeling confused. It was just such a powerful scene. And again, part of, by far, the best episode of this season so far. And what from some people have told me, possibly the best episode of the season. And it's definitely got me ready. It's got me ready to go for the next episode, episode 7. That again, I don't know the episode, or I don't know the name for, but I am so looking forward to it. And everyone, thank you very much for joining me on this one. I know it might have gone a little bit long. Again, I apologize, but I just had so much to say this time, and I'm really, really looking forward to bringing you the which will be Doctor Who episode 7 and episode 6 of Discovering Doctor Who. I'll see you next time.